Charlotte Mila team. Last time we read Mr. Messy. What a messy guy. This time, let's read Mr. Busy. He's a busy guy. There's never been anyone in the world quite like Mr. Busy. He could do things 10 times as fast as ever you or I could. For instance, if he was reading a book, he'd have finished it by now. There he is, lazing around. He lived in a very busy-looking house, which he built himself. As you can see, it had lots of doors and windows. And do you know what it was called? Weekend Cottage. And do you know why? Because it only took him 1 weekend to build it. One fine summer morning, Mr. Busy was up and about bright and early at 6 a.m. He jumped out of bed and had a bath and cleaned his teeth and cooked his breakfast. He ate his breakfast, he read the paper, and he washed up and made his bed and cleaned the house from top to bottom. By which time it was only 7 a.m. Busy, Mr. Busy. There he is getting ready for the day. Now, next door to Mr. Busy lived someone who wasn't quite such a busy person. In fact, he was a very unbusy person, and his name was Mr. Slow. If Mr. Slow was reading a book, he'd read it like this. He'd still be on the first page. And that same fine morning at 7:05, when Mr. Busy knocked on the door, Mr. Slow was fast asleep in his bed. He'd gone to bed for an afternoon nap the day before and somehow hadn't woken up until he heard Mr. Busy knocking at the door. Who's that knocking at my door? He called downstairs. Good morning, said Mr. Busy. Can I come in? And without waiting for an answer, Mr. Busy went right in. Where are you? He called. Upstairs, came the slow reply. So Mr. Busy went upstairs 2 at a time. Good heavens, he said. You are still in bed? And he made Mr. Slow get up. And he made his bed for him and cooked his breakfast for him and cleaned his house for him. Poor Mr. Slow. He hated to be rushed and fussed about. Right, said Mr. Busy briskly. It's a fine day. Let's go for a picnic. Mr. Slow pulled a face. I don't like picnics, he complained. Nonsense, replied Mr. Busy, and he busied himself around Mr. Slow's kitchen, making up a picnic for the two of them. It took him 1 minute. Right, he said, off we go. And he bustled Mr. Slow out of his front door and off they set. You see, he's got his basket there, but Mr. Slow isn't following him, I don't think. As you can imagine, Mr. Busy walks extremely quickly, and as you can imagine, Mr. Slow doesn't. So by the time Mr. Slow had walked a mile, do you know how far Mr. Slow had walked? We don't even see Mr. Slow in the picture. He'd only walked as far as his garden gate. Mr. Busy hurried back. Come on, he said impatiently. Hurry up. Hurry up, replied Mr. Slow. Impossible. Oh, all right, said Mr. Busy. We'll have a picnic in your garden. Wait a minute, though, he said. The grass needs cutting. And he rushed back to Weekend Cottage and rushed back again with the lawnmower and rushed up and down, cutting Mr. Slow's lawn. It took him 2.5 minutes. It would have taken him 2 minutes only, but he had to mow around Mr. Slow, who wouldn't get out of the way in time. Right, cried Mr. Busy. Picnic time. And together on that fine summer day, they had a fine picnic. Well, actually, Mr. Busy had a finer picnic than Mr. Slow, because he ate more quickly and had most of the food. Mr. Busy stretched out on the grass. That was fun, he said. I love picnics. You do, but I don't, said Mr. Slow. Tell you what, went on Mr. Busy, ignoring him. Tomorrow we'll go on a proper picnic out in the country. Mr. Slow pulled a face. And, went on Mr. Busy, in order to do that and get you out into the country, I'll have to call for you earlier in the morning than I did this morning. Mr. Slow pulled another face. See you tomorrow then, said Mr. Busy, and he went home and cleaned his house from top to bottom because he was Mr. Busy. The following morning, Mr. Busy jumped out of bed at 5 o'clock, had a bath and cleaned his teeth and cooked his breakfast and ate his breakfast and read the paper and washed up and made his bed and cleaned the house from top to bottom. by which time it was 6 a.m. He went and knocked on Mr. Slow's front door. Come on, he cried. Time to get up and be about. It's the day that we are going to have our picnic in the country. No reply. Come on, cried Mr. Busy again. No reply. Mr. Busy went inside and went upstairs 3 at a time and entered Mr. Slow's bedroom, expecting to find him in his bed. But he wasn't there. And he wasn't anywhere upstairs. And Mr. Slow was not anywhere downstairs. Bother, said Mr. Busy. I wonder where he's got to. Where Mr. Slow had got to was under his bed. Hiding. He didn't want to go on a picnic. Not he. Bother, said Mr. Busy again. That means I'll have to go on a picnic on my own. You can even see Mr. Slow. I think he's hiding under his bed. Under his bed, Mr. Slow smiled a slow smile. What a good idea, he said, and he went to sleep, snoring very softly.